rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Do you realize that the global elite, those that believe in a world government, they're currently meeting at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, to further their plan to govern the world? It's the establishment of a world government. Well, we will discuss the prophetic implications of that meeting on today's edition of End of the Age. But first, before I go off into my program today, I don't want you to forget about the conferences that will be held this weekend in Houston. Irvin Baxter will be teaching in 2 different locations, one Friday night and then another place on Saturday night, Sunday morning. So for the locations and times and different things, go to endtime.com, go to our website, and everything's listed there. Just go into the conference section and you can see where Irvin's going to be speaking. And before I go off into the global governing section of what's going on in Davos over yesterday and the next few days, I have to tell you something that's actually kind of comical. To some people, to a global alarmist, it's a complete travesty. To a person who is spreading the propaganda of human-induced global warming leads to climate change, oh my goodness, it's just wrecking their world. But to the ones of us that know it's a complete hoax, I got to be honest, this is actually kind of funny. So the Daily Caller and many other of the news outlets have reported that the scientist got buried in snow at Davos while lecturing on global warming. That's hilarious. Scientists have once again set up a mock Arctic base camp to educate these world leaders, these globalists, about man-made global warming at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. And these climate scientists, they hope that their mock camp that it would illustrate how global warming could impact the Arctic. But what they call the Gore effect, which they say that whenever Al Gore would show up in previous global warming meetings and different things, that it would always get super cold. So they call this the Gore effect as well. They said it may make it harder to get the message across. So what happens, Davos they've seen frigid temperatures along with about, get this, 6 feet, not 6 inches, 6 feet of snow in the last 6 days. And these guys are going there to promote human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change. And it snowed 6 feet. And so there was so much snow that the authorities evacuated some neighborhoods due to avalanche concerns. And that was reported by CNBC and so many other news outlets. These global elites, globalists, the guys that believe in a world government, and they've devoted their life to the establishment of that world government, they were headed to this conference. They had to force their way through these heavy snow drifts just to get there. And CNBC reported that the heavy snow had already blocked the rail line through the Alps from Zurich, and the villages along the route were at the highest level of avalanche alert. And so the Davos visitors, they were forced off these globalists, they were forced off trains and onto half-hour bus trips on back roads around the blockage, and then loading them onto a crowded red commuter train. They ran the rest of the way into Davos. And so the camp that was first set up by the climate scientist which was including those from the British Antarctic Survey at Davos in 2017 to convey the long-term negative changes in Arctic. They said that it's posing a serious socioeconomic risk of the rest of the world, according to a January 2017 Economic Forum blog post. They said the scientists hope to convince global leaders to take drastic actions to fight global warming. Well, climate has been a major topic of past Davos meetings, and even though most of the world signed on to the Paris Climate Accords, experts fear it's not enough to stop dangerous warming. Well, indeed, high-profile celebrities, politicians, all of these guys have visited the camp in the past that was set up, including former President Al Gore. Fashion designer Stella McCartney visited the camp this year, throughout the year, obviously bundled up to stay warm in the midst of all that snow. That was this year. It just snowed 6 feet, everybody. So they stated that the scientific evidence on Arctic change is unequivocal, and it's sending us a warning cry that the profound consequences and global risks that these scientists wrote in 2017. And it's all a propaganda by the United Nations to implement a world governing body to further global govern every citizen of the planet. And it's all just simply a hoax.
Turn your scriptures from black and white into color. Experience the footsteps of Jesus. Understand Bible prophecy that is coming to pass right now. Join Irvin and Judy Baxter and the End Time team this spring 2018 for a life-changing trip to Israel and Jordan. Mark your calendar for April 26th through May 11th for this amazing journey. Call 1-800-END-TIME, that's 1-800-363-8463 and press 2, or go to endtime.com/Israel-tour to receive your information today.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter, the new book by Irvin's grandson, provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your connection to God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at End Time will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Order this brand new book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
We got married in 2003. We clashed immediately. Everything seemed to be going wrong. We started following End Time Ministries, and we started going to End Time Bible studies.
About our life's never been the same. It's just been so powerful and so great, and God has done such a mighty work that saved my life, and it saved my soul for eternity.
God did use this ministry to literally bring us to Him and make the old man pass away and the new man come to life.
Thank you for giving to End Time Ministries.
Offering hope to people like us.
With every dollar, you change lives and provide hope for people just like Mark and Adrian. Thank you for giving to End Time Ministries.
So I've got to finish this real quick because it's so comical that these people set this camp up in 2017 to try to show these global leaders that, hey, global warming is leading to climate change, and then it's being cold. And they said that yet the risk from Arctic change remains invisible to the world's most powerful decision makers. They wanted to change all that this year. But guess what? 6 feet of snow. It's comical to me. I've been laughing reading about this today. So when these things happen, and the funny thing is, it's like God is sending them a message, because this is not the first time it's happened. Back in 2009, when world leaders were flying into Copenhagen, do you remember? To discuss a solution to global warming, they faced freezing weather at that point as a blizzard dumped 4 inches of snow on them. And it was like very, very cold temperatures. And they're trying to prove to these global leaders that global warming is leading to climate change. And at that time, they were simply trying to prove global warming. And then in 2010, as these same negotiators from nearly 200 countries met in Cancun, which you would have thought, hey, Cancun, it's got to be warm there, right? So we'll meet there. Well, they met there to strategize ways to keep the planet from getting hotter. And guess what? The temperature in the seaside Mexican city, Cancun, it plunged to a 100-year record low, 54 degrees. And of course, we know that human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change, is an absolute hoax. It's spread by the United Nations. It's their message to keep people in fear mode so they can globally govern them, but to enhance their global government. And it's like God is telling the global alarmists, look, guys, I'm the one that controls the climate, not you. This global warming climate change hoax, I'm in control here, not you guys. It's not humanistic solutions. And so it's really kind of comical if you look at it, because they're trying to sell all these global leaders on world government, and it's simply not working. These guys are already sold before they ever got there. And it's so funny that this week it snowed 6 feet. I just thought it was funny, and I had to bring it to you guys. So let's talk about Davos, Switzerland, and world government. The theme this year of Davos 2018, is creating a shared future in a fractured world. And they're simply preaching the message of globalization or world government. It's what this whole thing's all about. Global governance. Now, Donald Trump gives his speech on Friday. I'll be in New York at that time at my Bible study that I'm holding up there. I wish I was on the radio Friday, because I promise you his speech is going to be earth-shattering at this thing. It was earth-shattering at the United Nations, the seat of world government. You can imagine what it's going to be at Davos, Switzerland. The head of all these world governments and their administrations are represented there. So the Gulf Times, they reported that the focus on governments in reshaping global systems at Davos. It's all about global governance, folks. This article was written by David Seetharam, and he's the group CEO from Doha Bank. He stated that the 48th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum is going to be held this week at Davos, Switzerland. And it's created a shared future in a fractured world, because they've talked about people that have pulled out of this world governing system, i.e. the United States. They talked about Brexit and all the other nationalistic movements around the world. And they said, hey, we need a shared world in a fractured world. We need to create that. And that's the theme. And it's going to make a case for the meeting this week. And it's going to create a case for a renewed commitment to what else? International collaboration as a way of solving critical global challenges. In other words, we need to enhance this world government that we've already established. And so the writer said that I look forward to this event and some of the areas which are of interest to me, including supporting efforts to improve global governance mechanisms and advance major multilateral processes such as the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Well, of course, that's the Agenda 2030, the United Nations universal agenda to govern every single person on the earth. Everything they do, they produce, they consume, everything, every aspect of your life. And it goes on to say that innovations and discoveries that will have the greatest impact in reshaping global systems. So all of Davos, Switzerland, this meeting, this World Economic Forum, is all about global governance, global governance. The process of globalization, doing away with the nation state and every nation tearing down their borders, creating a global community that answers to a world government. That's what this whole meeting is devoted to. And then CNBC reported that the German leader Merkel says that the current world order is under threat. What world order is she talking about? The same world order prophesied in Revelation chapter 13, the world government that will be established in the end time. That's the world order that she's talking about. She's saying it's under threat. Angela Merkel, obviously she's Germany's chancellor. She delivered a speech, and during the plenary session on day 2 of the World Economic Forum, and she said that multilateralism was under threat and that protectionism is not the answer to the world's problems. Okay, so what are those terms? Multilateralism, protectionism. Multilateralism, moving into global governance. Global governance of the entire globe. And protectionism, nationalism, setting up borders and protecting your nation. She said, frankly speaking, the country I have the honor to represent, Germany, where I am chancellor, has its difficulties. And polarization is something that we see in our country as well, which we haven't had for decades. She said, Germany wishes to be a country that lends its contribution in the future to solve the problems of the world together. We think that shutting ourselves off and isolating ourselves will not lead us into a good future. Protectionism, i.e., what the United States is doing right now, she sees is not the proper answer. She's a globalist. She's a liberal internationalist. She's up to her eyeballs in the belief system of a world government. And she's just the latest leader at Davos to criticize the protectionist and isolationist stance towards the world's problems. And such comments appear to be directed towards, obviously, Donald Trump, who has adopted an America First stance in his foreign and economic policies. Again, I wish I could be here on the radio with you the day he gives his speech there. I think it will be epic. And she said that we have not learned from the lessons of history. Well, actually, Donald Trump has. And that's why he's pulling the United States out of this New World Order. And she says, in contrast, that the answer to the world's problems was to see multilateral solutions instead of unilateral the protectionist course of action. So what is multilateralism? That word's just thrown out there. Well, do you remember Dr. Seitherman's quote? He said, I look forward to this event, and some of the areas which are of interest to me include supporting efforts to improve global governance mechanisms and advancing major multilateral processes such as the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So multilateralism is global governance. She said that the foundation of the United Nations, the UN, was a multilateral, i.e. global governing and cooperative solution that was born out of World War II, adding that a multilateral response helped to resolve the global financial crisis of 2008-2009, a global governing response. So every speech that's given just about is directly, specifically devoted to the further establishment of this world government. Why am I talking about it on end of the age today? Because the Bible prophesies there will be a world government established in the end time, and that the Antichrist will eventually usurp authority over that world government, and that entity would rule the world until the second coming of Jesus Christ. The world government prophesied in Revelation chapter 13 is the exact establishment, the global government that's being established by these leaders that are going to this World Economic Forum. That's what they're hoping to establish. And it's a socialistic one world governing body. Now, Justin Trudeau, who's the Prime Minister of Canada, he actually just spoke at Davos. Listen at his speech, some excerpts. He says, before I begin, it won't surprise you that my remarks today will address the importance of progressive or socialistic values in the context of globalization. On that note, today, I am pleased to announce that Canada and the 10 other remaining members of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, you remember Donald Trump yanked us out of that just when he was just in office. He, early in January of last year, yanked us out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Well, the other 11 members kept going. And they just concluded discussions with Tokyo, Japan, on a new comprehensive and progressive agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's called the CPTPP. Now, the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership is a new step on that path. And he said today is a great day for Canada and a great day for progressive trade. Well, according to the Financial Times, the CPTPP is a contrast to the TPP. So it says, oh, it's a little different. They backed off some stuff. And that it's a grand gesture that allows regional leaders like Malcolm Turnbull and Justin Trudeau to proclaim their commitment to a liberal world order. That's what this is all devoted to, folks, a world government and multilateral governance. There it is again, world government and free trade while giving up very little in return. Really? They've devoted themselves to this new world order and global government governing free trade. But according to the New Zealand Foreign Affairs and Trade website, who is a member of this, that the CPTPP also provides New Zealand with better access to government contracts in Canada, Japan, and Singapore over and above the access we already have secured to those markets through the World Trade Organization on government procurement. So the CPTPP will be regulated by the WTO, which is a global governing entity. How do you know, Dave? Because the World Trade Organization is the only global international organization dealing with the rules of trade between nations. So this is a global governing pact that's been signed. That's why we were thankful that Donald Trump pulled us out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Why is that so important? I want to go through it today because it's so critical you understand why it was so important that Donald Trump pulled us out of that. It's all prophesied in Scripture. I've been talking about it. It's like I've been doing a series on this almost because this is one of the most recognizable prophecies in the end time. There's a world government going to be established. The United States is going to pull out of that. And it's happening right before our very eyes. Why is it so important that Donald Trump pulled us out of that? Once you understand the ramifications of what the Trans-Pacific Partnership would have done, and President Obama had, I mean, he was a globalist. He believed in a world governing body, the new world order, as did many of the previous administrations. And he signed us onto this Trans-Pacific Partnership. So why is it so important? Well, for more than 5 years, President Obama, along with the 11 of the other countries, negotiated the largest trade agreement the world had ever known. It was the agreement obviously called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP. The TPP was formed when 12 countries bordering the Pacific Ocean signed up in February of 2016. And as a result of their signatures, the TPP represented 40% of the world's economic output. So imagine being able to govern, sitting back as the World Trade Organization and govern the world 40% of the world's economic output. Now, this is all moving towards global governance. You understand the big picture here. So according to BBC, the pact aimed to deepen economic ties between these nations, slashing tariffs and fostering trade to boost growth. Now that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? But the members had also hoped to foster closer relationships and economic policies and regulation. The agreement was designed so that it could eventually create a new single market, something like that of the EU. So there had to be one global governing body of that would regulate that. Who is that? Well, the World Trade Organization is the only entity that governs trade between nations. And so at the time, U.S. Senator Jeff Sessions, he was worried that the adoption of the Trans-Pacific Partnership would lead to a historic international regulatory commission. That's exactly what it would have done. And that would encompass 90% of the world's GDP. Imagine being able to govern that. They're headed towards global governance. His concern was that it would create a self-governing, self-perpetuating commission with extraordinary implications for American workers and American sovereignty. Then, if you remember right, you had the fast track plan to unify 90% of the world's economy. And so President Obama knew that he could not get the TPP agreement approved if he had to get 2/3 of the vote, the ratification by the Senate. which would be required if the agreement were to be presented to Congress as a treaty. So, therefore, he requested that it was called fast-track authority. And the law granting fast-track authority is called the Trade Promotion Authority, the TPA. And the House did vote 218 to 208 to grant fast-track authority to President Obama. And so the Senate passed the bill, and President Obama signed it in February of 2016. Well, at that point, Senator Sessions explained his opposition to the bill, which is my opposition to the bill. He said basically it's essential that there's no misunderstanding. Fast Track pre-approves the formation of not only the unprecedentedly large TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but an unlimited number of such agreements over the next 6 years. So they weren't going to stop at those 12 nations. And this is what Canada is being pulled into. He said there's going to be an unlimited number of agreements that will follow that because they're trying to manage the globe, not just these 12 nations. And so those pacts included 3 of the most ambitious ever contemplated. After the TPT would come the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, the TTIP, between the United States and the European Union, followed by the Trade and Services Agreement, TISA, and seeking as one of its goals labor mobility among more than 50 nations. So together with these 3 international compacts, that would encompass 3/4 of the world's GDP, including the nations whose membership was being courted for their after enactment. And these countries involved would encompass nearly 90% of the global GDP. And so I want to make sure you get this next point. So I'm going to wait till after the break to come back and to finish my thought on this fast track, because it's so important you understand Donald Trump's decision to pull us out of TPP. And this is what Trudeau's talking about at Davos.
If ever people need to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for End Time Magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will really impact your life. End Time has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that End Time Magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and leave them in doctors' offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine has done in many lives. Call 1-800-363-8463. That's 1-800-END-TIME and get your subscription today.
Turn your scriptures from black and white into color. Experience the footsteps of Jesus. Understand Bible prophecy that is coming to pass right now. Join Irvin and Judy Baxter and the End Time team this spring 2018 for a life-changing trip to Israel and Jordan. Mark your calendar for April 26th through May 11th for this amazing journey. Call 1-800-END-TIME, that's 1-800-363-8463 and press 2, or go to endtime.com/Israel-tour to receive your information today.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archives button.
So just to make sure you got it before the break, I was talking about Donald Trump's pulling us out of the TPP and the importance of that. Because Canada, even though the United States pulled out, Canada and the other 10 nations have went ahead and ran with that. And so it was important to us because if we'd have stayed in the TPP and all of these other agreements would have been made, and all of the countries that were being courted besides those agreements, it would have encompassed nearly 90% of the global GDP. Now imagine being able to set that and control 90% of the global output. Imagine. Global governance, folks. That's what's being talked about at Davos. And Donald Trump understood what was coming, understood what it would do, and pulled us out of that. So you remember, through fast track, let me finish my thought here. Through fast track, Congress would have authorized the president. It authorized the president to ink these deals before a page of them has been made public. And then the executive sends it to Congress, implementing legislation to change U.S. law and legislation. So we cannot be, it couldn't be amended at that point. It can't be filibustered. And it would not be subjected to constitutional requirements for a 2/3 treaty vote. It would pretty much a done deal at that point. So at that point, Senator Sessions, he said, look, this global governing, it's a global governance authority, folks. It's open-ended. The commission and any subsidiary body established under this agreement may establish rules of procedures for the conduct of its work. It covers everything from the movement of foreign nationals, and no party shall adopt or maintain measures that impose limitations on the total number of natural persons that may be employed in a particular service sector. So in the form of numerical quotas or requirement of an economic needs test, and many different things, to climate regulation, the parties acknowledge that transition to a low emissions economy required collective action. They were talking about global governance. Sessions was saying, this is a global governing scheme, folks. He said these 5,554 pages are like the Laputians that bound Gulliver on Gulliver's Travels. He said they will enmesh our great country and economy in a global commission, a world government, where bureaucrats from Brunei have the same vote as the United States. And so you understand the ramifications of what would have happened if we'd have stayed in the TPP. And this is what Trudeau is proudly proclaiming is going on in his country at Davos, Switzerland. So obviously, thankfully, throughout his presidential campaign, presidential candidate at that point, Donald Trump, understood the global governing economic ramifications of the TPP, and he stated this. He said, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is the greatest danger yet. The TPP, as it's known, would be the death blow for American manufacturing. And he was absolutely correct. He said it would give up all of our economic leverage to an international commission, a world government. He understood that back when he was running, probably years ago. And he said that would put the interest of foreign countries above our own. And he said there's no way to fix the TPP. We need bilateral trade deals. We do not need to enter into another massive international agreement that ties us up and binds us down like the TPP does. What happened? On January 23rd, 2017, making good on a campaign promise, Donald Trump signed an executive order withdrawing the United States from the controversial Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal. You wonder why the international community screamed at that point? Because they were trying to rope the United States into internationally supervised global trade deals. Donald Trump gets elected and says, nah, we're pulling out of that. I'm thankful for that. And do I agree with everything Donald Trump has done? Absolutely not. But on that point, absolutely, I do. And we're watching a fulfillment of Bible prophecy, folks. You understand, the United States will pull out of this world governing body. We're watching it happen right before our very eyes. Now, let's get back to Davos. This is the World Economic Forum. So there is an article that said that the world needs a leader. Europe should step up. On yesterday's program, I talked about that the United States would stand with Israel. Europe would be the seat of world government in the end time. It's where the Antichrist is going to come from. And that it would take the reins of power of this world governing body all the way to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Well, in Davos, which is devoted to global governance, there was somebody that wrote an article that said the world needs a leader. Europe should step up because obviously they believe the United States is stepping away. So Philippe Roger Donnet, he's the chief executive of Generali. He said, in the current global geopolitical and economic landscape, Well-defined leadership is difficult to identify. They always thought it was the United States. They're kind of going off the scene. So Europe, he says, can take advantage of this great opportunity and shape the future role in the world scenario. He's proposing what the Bible says is actually going to happen. He said global leadership, especially in socioeconomic terms, could become the shared goal of European citizens. Despite French President Macron's admirable efforts and robust stance in favor of a strengthened European Union, Europe lacks a common, compelling, and ambitious vision. He said, with approximately 2 out of the 3 Europeans saying that they don't see any advantage for their nations as a result of being part of the EU, according to Deloitte, the process of integration is clearly suffering from a lack of confidence. I would too if I had to yield up my sovereignty to a global governing body. I would have a lack of confidence as well. He said there is malice across Europe, which is signaled by an increased polarization between the pro-EU and the Eurosceptic parties, as obviously, i.e. Brexit, wanting to pull out. So he said naturally part of this sentiment is reflected in the position of many European political leaders who are reluctant to take decisive steps towards a more united policies. He said the opportunity of seizing the global leadership role could be the vision EU citizens need. The United States is creating a void. Let's fill that void and bring the EU to the power plant that we all have always envisioned it to be, a United States of Europe. He went on to say it wouldn't be a far-fetched proposal. Europe is by far the world's the largest exporter, and it boasts 9 out of the 20 of the world's most competitive national economies, according to the World Economic Forum. And so the European countries share by and large the same advanced social aspiration as them. And he said, I'd like to call it the European way. It's set out in the Treaty of Rome, and which is 60 years ago, paved the way for the European communities, the promotion of employment, improved living and working conditions, proper social protection, dialogue between management and labor, development and human resources with a view to the combating of exclusion. He says it's the European way, folks. It's brought peace and progress to the European people over the past decades, and it's a cultural identity that binds the EU citizens and can support Europe's vision of global leadership. You say, man, that's a lot of political jargon there. Absolutely. And it's a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. The United States going off the scene as the global governing leader, the New World Order leader, and the power swinging to Europe. And so we're watching this happen right before our very eyes. It's very important that we understand that. I know it kind of seems laborious to go through it at times, but you've got to understand this stuff. We're living in the end time. We're not looking way off and saying that the end time's coming at some point. We're living through this. These efforts that these people are talking about this week at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, they're talking about exactly what the Bible prophesies is. It's going to be the political atmosphere in the end time. And so, can it be laborious? Yeah, it can. But you've got to go through this stuff to understand what's going on. The Bible says during the time of the Antichrist, they that understand among the people shall instruct many. It's imperative that we go through these efforts to dig deep into this stuff and find out really what's going on. And folks, it's happening today. It's not light years away. The meeting in Davos, Switzerland that they're having right now is devoted to the establishment of this one world governing body prophesied in Revelation chapter 13. So the next one comes from the World Economic Forum. All of these I got from the World Economic Forum. Very, very important. Said that the global liberal democratic order might be down, but it's not out. So they said for the first time in over half a century, liberal democracy is in retreat. The democratic waves that ebbed and flowed between the 19th and 20th century appear to be receding once more. With illiberalism on the rise, illiberalism, I should say. Let me correct that, sorry. with illiberalism on the rise, or nationalism, i.e. what Donald Trump is doing to the United States, America first. He said there are fears that this could be the year the global liberal order dies. Well, that's not going to happen. This guy would know that's not going to happen if he understood the prophecies of the Bible. He said the order consists of a dense network. Now, he's going to spell it out for us, folks. It consists of a dense network of international agreements. I just talked about one, TPP. That's just one of the hundreds. And then trade arrangements and military alliances, drawing on Enlightenment-era values of liberty and reason. It was constructed by the U.S. President Teddy Roosevelt. He's talking about the United Nations and other organizations, and the Western Allies in 1945. The Charter for the United Nations was written in 1945. And its express purpose, this new world order that was established, was to prevent the recurrence of war and the economic nationalism that inspired conflict to begin with. And he said, while the order has come under criticism in the past, it's never experienced anything quite like the assault of the president and of the present, the assault of our president, the assault of the present situation. And he said, at the center of the global order. So they're talking about, when he says global order, liberal international order, new world order, it's all world government. And if you just went to, if you just got out of high school, if you just got out of college, you're not being taught about this. You're being taught the United Nations is the great last humanitarian hope for the world. No, it's a world government that's being established that's trying to run your life in every way. That's what it's doing. And so he says at the center of the global liberal order, the world government, are a clutch of organizations designed to defend democratic governments on open economies and common security. Among them are the United Nations. It's a world government. The International Monetary Fund, world government. And the World Bank. They're all founded in 1945. They're all part of the established world government in the earth today. The General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade that later became the World Trade Organization in 1995. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, in 1949. And there are hundreds and hundreds of others. And so you can see they're talking about Davos, Switzerland. They're talking about the creation of a one world government as we speak in the earth today, folks. That's what this whole meeting is designed to do. And I actually thought it was kind of funny that it snowed 6 feet on them. It's comical because that's a hoax, but they're over there promoting that as we speak right now.
The nation of Israel, God's chosen place from the beginning of time. It's no coincidence that strife, conflict, and rumors of war follow it every day. We believe America's destiny is to aid the nation of Israel and Jewish people around the world. This is something we're passionate about. End Time Ministries is partnering with the Jewish Agency for Israel and outreach to assist Jews to find their way home. Your gift will greatly impact America's God-given destiny to join with the Jews so they also can have full understanding of Bible prophecy and what is just ahead. Become a partner today. If you are unable to donate financially, please continue to pray for America's direction on helping Israel and its calling to assist God's chosen nation. The Bible predicts there is another Jewish Holocaust just ahead. Persecution against the Jews will take place. Help today by donating any amount to save the Jews by calling 1-800-END-TIME or go to endtime.com right now.
So, like I said, and you can understand the dynamics here. I mean, we're talking about Davos, Switzerland, basically devoted to the world government. And then you got Donald Trump, who has been trying to pull us out of the world government in many ways. He's going there to speak Friday. And so, like I said, I can guarantee it's going to be an epic speech, unless I'm just missing something. And so I wanted to go through a few things because I want you to understand the dynamics of what's going to happen Friday. Donald Trump's been pulling us out of all kinds of stuff. The Paris Climate Agreement, like I said, TPP. He talked about socialism at his first speech in the United Nations, which is a socialistic organization. I mean, so many different things he's pulled us out of, but there's some things you might not know about that have been done by the United States to pull us out of this global governing body. And the dynamics will be so neat when he goes there on Friday to speak, because really for the last 70 plus years, 73 years now, 73, 74 years, 73 years since 1945, we have been the leader of this world governing body. That we've been the big brother that everybody looked to for leadership. Well, now we're pulling out of that. And so everybody's kind of floundering. Well, now the president of that entity, the United States, is going there to speak at Davos. And so with the time I have left, I want to go through a couple things that Donald Trump has done that you may not be familiar with, but it's very important that you understand he's done a lot more than a lot of people think. And if you don't dig into this, you'd never know. It's going to go right by you and you think, well, I mean, he's doing a lot of stuff and it's really cool, but did you hear what he said the other day in this? No, it's way past that. Donald Trump, it seems, because when he was a presidential candidate, he started talking about the process of globalization, how that was a bad thing, the establishment, and how that was a bad thing. And so we started thinking, man, this guy really kind of understands what's going on. And so you say, man, you guys talk about Donald Trump a lot. We almost have to, because he's done so much that's a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. If he hadn't been doing all this stuff, we'd probably hardly ever talk about the guy. But since he's done so much towards the fulfillment of Bible prophecy, we've got to talk about it, because it's letting us know we're in the end time. And so a couple things, I don't know if I'll get to both of them, but one thing he's done that was very important, I mean very important, was the United States withdrew from the Global Compact on Migration. So you say, well, I've never heard about that. That's exactly the reason I'm bringing it up. So if you remember Strobe Talbot, the president of the Brookings Institution from 2002 to 2017, and he was a former Secretary of State under the Clinton administration, he stated it probably most clearly in an article, The Birth of a Global Nation, back in time in July 20th in 92. He said, I'll bet that within the next 100 years, nationhood, or the nation state as we know it, would be obsolete. All states will recognize a single global authority or a world government. Well, that's the goal of every globalist. That's the goal of these people that are going to Davos, Switzerland, as we speak, and they're speaking. Listen to the speeches. Every one of them is devoted to a world government. And so, along with the United Nations, the removal of national borders and the creation of a single global community, which answers to a world government, that's the goal of a globalist. So, it's the establishment of a world government. So, in order for this to happen, nations will need to throw open their borders and allow whosoever will come in. Obama was doing it. Hillary Clinton was absolutely willing to do it. Just allow whosoever will. Do they need to come in legally? Nah, they didn't care. And so this is exactly what the United Nations is pressing for. So you say, really? Yeah, consider the United Nations Global Compact for Migration, the GCM. According to the United Nations' own website, the Global Compact is a significant opportunity to improve the governance on migration, to address the challenges associated with today's migration, and to strengthen the contribution of migrants and migration to sustainable development. You say, wow, that's a mouthful. Yeah, it is, but if you got to dig down into it, you find out what it really means. So, sustainable development. You understand the Sustainable Development Goals. Goal number 10. There's 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals. And they are goals that are set forth by the United Nations, adopted by all the nations on the earth, to implement them and to globally govern the world once these things are carried out. The goal was to have all of them done by 2030. It's the 2030 agenda, transforming the world. Well, goal number 10 of these Sustainable Development Goals is to reduce inequality within and among countries. Target, and then they've got, there's goals, and then there's 169 different targets in each of them. So goal number 10 and target number 7 of that is to facilitate the orderly and safe, regular and responsible migration and mobility of people, including through the implementation of a planned and well-managed migration policies. So essentially, the UN wants to even out the inequalities among countries through the movement of people around the world in an orderly fashion. Now, do you see how any nation that would be willing to throw open their borders and be managed by this international organization to do that, you see how we'd be looking at world government in this aspect? Andrew Arthur, who serves as a resident fellow in law and policy for the Center for Immigration Studies, he describes the situation like this. He said that were the United States to continue in the GCM and were the compact to push to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, the United States would essentially have to implement an totally open border policy to even make a dent in the inequality among nations. In other words, instead of trying to bring in everybody here and make them come in legally, we'd have to throw it open and say, whosoever will. So you can see the ramifications of that. So just like the Paris Climate Agreement, the Global Compact on Migration is to be used to implement the global management system of the Sustainable Development Goals. So what it's designed to do. And they had to get people to buy into that. So that's why the United States decided to end participation in the UN process to develop a global compact on migration. You see how important that is? Rather than throwing open our borders, which, I mean, everybody, President Obama, Hillary Clinton, Secretary Kerry, I heard that he made a speech at a college and said, you guys get prepared to graduate into a borderless world. These guys were sold on the Sustainable Development Goals to globally govern the world. So once the Trump administration recognized more global governing restrictions on the United States, they simply withdrew from the GCM. And on December 3rd, 2017, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, he said, negotiations on the GCM will be based on the New York Declaration. It's a document adopted by the United Nations in 2016 that commits to strengthening global governance and contains a number of policy goals that are inconsistent with the United States law and policy. He said, while we continue to engage on a number of fronts at the United Nations, in this case, we simply cannot, in good faith, support a process that could undermine the sovereign right of the United States to enforce our own immigration laws and secure our borders. The United States supports international cooperation on migration issues, but the United States, is the primary responsibility of sovereign states to help ensure that migration is safe, orderly, and legal. And then, of course, Nikki Haley. I love Nikki Haley. She's the ambassador to the United Nations, the United States ambassador. Many of you know who I'm talking about. She said our decisions on immigration policies must always be made by Americans and Americans alone, not some international organization that will dictate to us what to do. She said, we will decide how best to control our borders and who will be allowed to enter our country. So you can see the importance of what Donald Trump is doing. And folks, it's a direct fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Like I said, we've been the big brother of this world governing body for 70 plus years now. We've been the one the world has looked to for leadership to implement these things. And yet in 2016, 2017, we elect a president, pulls us out of many of these things. He pulled us out of, one of the biggest ones was the Paris Climate Agreement. It was the same thing. It was getting all of us to commit, all the nations of the world, to commit to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, the Global Compact on Migration, that we also withdrew from UNESCO. UNESCO, the United Nations Education, Scientific, Culture Organization, probably best known for its World Heritage Program to protect cultural sites and traditions around the world, while also advocating humanitarian efforts on the environment, education, and science. So, for decades, UNESCO is undertaking the task of recognizing the most significant sites in the world as part of their famed Heritage Site program. However, over the times, just like most of the United Nations organizations, it became an anti-Israel entity. It had a bias. In 2011, the U.S. stopped funding UNESCO after it voted to include Palestine as a member. And then, even though Palestine's never even been a nation, they've never had a nation. And then on October 13, 2016, Netanyahu announced that today UNESCO adopted its second decision that year, denying the Jewish people's connection to the Temple Mount. He said it was our holiest site for more than 3,000 years, and he's absolutely correct. God gave that land to Abraham 4,000 years ago. And David purchased the threshing floor of Arana, which is the Temple Mount, 3,000 years ago. But yet, the UNESCO said, nah, they don't have any right to that. Then on May 2nd, 2017, UNESCO passed a new resolution referring throughout the document to Israel as the occupying power in Jerusalem, indicating that it has no legal or historical ties to any part of the city. I'm scratching my head thinking, what in the world's going on? And then on July 7, 2017, UNESCO determined that the Cave of the Patriarchs in Hebron is a Palestinian heritage site, meaning that it wasn't a Jewish site, even though Abraham purchased the Cave of Machpelah in Hebron in Genesis chapter 23, and Abraham and several members of his family are buried there, including Isaac, Jacob. Jacob's name was changed to Israel, Sarah, Rebekah, and Leah. And the only one that's missing is Rachel, who was buried near Bethlehem when she died in childbirth. UNESCO said, no, that's not Jewish. That's a Palestinian heritage site. So you see the anti-Israel bias? And then you wonder why the United States just pulled out of UNESCO. It's one of the biggest reasons. So you can see the fulfillment of Bible prophecy, the United States pulling out of this world governing body. And I can tell you what, I'm very thankful for that.
End of the Age is a production of End Time Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. End Time Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.